It was a regular morning for millions of viewers tuning in to watch The View. The hosts were seated around their iconic round table, ready to dive into the day's hot topics, but no one expected what was about to unfold, a moment that would ripple through the media landscape and change lives forever. Karoline Leavitt, a young conservative commentator known for her sharp insights and bold opinions, had been invited as a guest. She wasn't new to heated debates. She'd made a name for herself speaking truth to power. But this time things felt different. The energy in the studio seemed charged, almost electric, like everyone knew they were stepping into uncharted territory. The topic? Free speech. It was a subject that always sparked strong reactions, but today it hit closer to home than anyone anticipated. As Karoline shared her thoughts defending free expression without boundaries, Whoopi Goldberg, one of the show's veteran co-hosts, leaned forward with raised eyebrows. Her tone shifted from curious to confrontational. "Are you sure you're qualified to speak on this?" Whoopi asked, her voice laced with skepticism. "I mean, how much experience do you really have?" At first, Karoline smiled politely, brushing off the comment. But Whoopi didn't stop there. She added, "You're just another young person, trying to make noise where it doesn't belong." The room fell silent. Even the other hosts exchanged uneasy glances. For Karoline, those words stung. Not because they were harsh, but because they felt dismissive. It wasn't just about her age or background. It was about being treated like her voice didn't matter. And she wasn't about to let that slide. "Well," Karoline replied calmly but firmly, "if my age disqualifies me from having an opinion, then maybe we need to rethink who gets to speak at all." The tension in the air was palpable. Viewers at home couldn't look away. Social media lit up instantly. Supporters of Karoline rushed to defend her, calling Whoopi's comments unfair and disrespectful. Critics, on the other hand, argued that Karoline should expect tough questions if she wanted to play in the big leagues. But the conversation didn't end when the cameras stopped rolling. Clips of the exchange went viral, sparking debates across platforms. Some praised Karoline for standing her ground, while others accused her of playing the victim. Meanwhile, Whoopi faced backlash too, with many accusing her of using her position to belittle someone younger and less established. Days turned into weeks, and the controversy only grew louder. Talk shows, podcasts, and news outlets dissected every word spoken during that fateful episode. People debated whether Whoopi's remarks were harmless banter or something more damaging. For Karoline, the incident became personal. Friends and colleagues told her she had two choices: let it go or fight back, and fight back she did. In a press conference, flanked by her legal team, Karoline announced she was suing Whoopi Goldberg and ABC, the network behind The View, for defamation. She claimed the comments had tarnished her reputation and hurt her career prospects. The lawsuit sent shockwaves through Hollywood and beyond. No one could remember the last time a daytime talk show found itself in such a high-stakes legal battle. For The View, the timing couldn't have been worse. The show prided itself on fostering open dialogue, even when conversations got messy. But now it was under fire for possibly crossing a line. Advertisers started pulling out, worried about associating with controversy. Behind the scenes, producers scrambled to contain the damage, but the cracks were already showing. As the story unfolded, one thing was clear. This wasn't just about a single comment anymore. It was about accountability, respect, and the power dynamics at play in the world of media. And as the legal battle loomed ahead, everyone braced themselves for what might come next. Little did they know, this was only the beginning. The lawsuit filed by Karoline against Whoopi Goldberg and ABC didn't just fade into the background like many expected. Instead, it exploded into a full-blown media circus that grabbed headlines for weeks on end. People couldn't stop talking about it. Was this a case of free speech gone wrong? Or was it an example of someone finally standing up to a powerful figure in the entertainment industry? Everyone had an opinion, and no one seemed shy about sharing it. Karoline's legal team wasted no time getting to work. They argued that Whoopi's comments during the show weren't just casual jabs, they were calculated insults meant to undermine her credibility. Her lawyers pointed out specific phrases from the episode, claiming these words painted Karoline as inexperienced and unqualified. To make their case stronger, they brought in experts who testified that such remarks could damage anyone's reputation, especially someone early in their career trying to establish themselves. On the other side, Whoopi and ABC fought back fiercely. Their defense rested heavily on the First Amendment, the idea that people have the right to express their opinions freely, even if those opinions are unpopular or hurtful. Lawyers for the network argued that talk shows like The View thrive on lively debates and viewers know what they're signing up for when they tune in. It's not defamation, one of their attorneys said during a press briefing. It's conversation. But as the legal battle dragged on, things started to get messy. Depositions, those sworn testimonies given under oath, became public, and they revealed far more than anyone anticipated. Clips of internal meetings at The View surfaced online, showing heated arguments among the hosts about how to handle controversial guests. Some of the co-hosts admitted feeling pressured to tone down disagreements on air to avoid blowback. Others confessed they often disagreed with how certain topics were framed, but felt powerless to change anything. These leaks painted a picture of a show struggling to stay relevant in an increasingly divided world. Ratings might have been high, but behind the scenes, morale was plummeting. Staff members whispered about the growing tension between the hosts. Rumors spread that some of them were considering leaving the show altogether if things didn't improve soon. Meanwhile, advertisers, the lifeblood of any television program, started jumping ship. Big brands began pulling their commercials, worried about being associated with a show embroiled in so much drama. One major sponsor released a statement saying they valued positive messaging and couldn't align themselves with controversy. It was a polite way of saying, "We're out." As the financial strain mounted, executives at Disney, which owns ABC, grew increasingly nervous. The company had already invested millions in producing The View, and now they faced the possibility of paying even more if the lawsuit went south. Private meetings were held to discuss contingency plans, including cutting costs and reevaluating the show's future. Executives debated whether settling the case quietly would be cheaper than risking a devastating verdict in court. For Karoline, the spotlight only grew brighter. Supporters rallied around her, praising her courage for taking on such a powerful opponent. Critics, however, accused her of using the lawsuit as a publicity stunt to boost her profile. But regardless of where people stood, everyone agreed on one thing: Karoline wasn't backing down anytime soon. Back in the courtroom, tensions ran high. Both sides presented mountains of evidence: emails, transcripts, expert analyses, all aimed at proving their point. At times, the proceedings felt less like a trial and more like a reality TV drama. Reporters camped outside the courthouse daily, eager to catch glimpses of the key players as they arrived and left. Social media buzzed with reactions to every twist and turn. Whoopi herself appeared visibly shaken by the ordeal. Known for her quick wit and larger-than-life personality, she seemed unusually subdued during interviews. In one rare appearance, she acknowledged the weight of the situation. "I never intended to hurt anyone," she said softly. "This is hard, for all of us." Despite her attempts to clarify her intentions, the damage was done. The longer the case dragged on, the clearer it became that this wasn't just about one comment anymore. It was about accountability. Could someone as influential as Whoopi Goldberg, or any celebrity for that matter, be held responsible for what they said on live television? And if so, where did the line get drawn? As the weeks turned into months, the stakes kept rising. For The View, the pressure was relentless. Producers tried to keep the show running smoothly, but cracks were starting to show. Segments felt forced, jokes fell flat, and the once vibrant chemistry among the hosts seemed strained. Even loyal fans noticed the shift. Online forums lit up with discussions about whether the show had lost its spark. In the middle of all this chaos, Karoline stayed focused. She continued making appearances on other platforms, using her growing platform to speak about issues close to her heart. Whether it was discussing free speech, women in politics, or the importance of standing up for oneself, she commanded attention. Her confidence inspired many, while others dismissed her as overly ambitious. Either way, she was becoming impossible to ignore. And yet, despite all the noise, uncertainty loomed over everything. Would the jury side with Karoline, setting a precedent that could reshape how celebrities interact with the public? Or would they rule in favor of Whoopi and ABC, reinforcing the notion that performers are entitled to say whatever they want without consequence? No one knew for sure, but one thing was certain. Whatever happened next would leave a lasting mark, not just on the people involved, but on the entire entertainment industry. As the final stages of the trial approached, anticipation reached a fever pitch. Viewers tuned in to every update, hanging on to every word. The world was watching, waiting to see how this chapter in television history would conclude. Little did they know, the most shocking moments were still ahead. After months of heated arguments, endless speculation, and countless courtroom dramas, the moment everyone had been waiting for finally arrived. The jury was ready to deliver its verdict. By now, the case had become more than just a legal battle. It was a cultural phenomenon. News outlets covered every detail, social media buzzed with predictions, and people from all walks of life tuned in to see what would happen next. The courtroom was packed that day. Reporters squeezed into every available seat, cameras clicked, non-stop, and whispers filled the air. Karoline sat quietly with her legal team, her expression calm but unreadable. Whoopi Goldberg, on the other hand, looked visibly tense. Her usual confidence seemed shaken, replaced by a mix of worry and exhaustion. The weight of the situation hung heavy over everyone present. When the judge entered the room and called for silence, you could hear a pin drop. The foreman of the jury stood up, holding the decision that would change everything. He cleared his throat before reading the verdict aloud. "We find in favor of the plaintiff." The room erupted. Gasps echoed through the space as people processed the words. Karoline had won. Not only that, but the jury awarded her $50 million in damages, a staggering sum that sent shockwaves through the entertainment industry. For many, it felt like justice served. For others, it was an outcome they hadn't seen coming. As the reality sank in, Karoline allowed herself a small smile. It wasn't triumph or gloating, it was relief. She stood up briefly to thank her lawyers and supporters, then left the courthouse without making a statement. Outside, however, her fans cheered wildly, holding signs that read messages like, "Stand your ground," and "Accountability matters." Some even chanted her name, celebrating what they saw as a victory not just for her, but for anyone who'd ever felt dismissed or disrespected because of their age or background. Whoopi, meanwhile, looked stunned. She didn't say much after the verdict, except for a short statement released later that evening. In it, she expressed disappointment but vowed to appeal the decision. "I respect the court's ruling," she said, "but I believe strongly in the right to free speech. This isn't over." But the financial impact of the verdict hit hard, and fast. ABC executives scrambled to figure out how to handle the massive payout. Disney, which owns ABC, refused to cover the entire amount, leaving the network scrambling to find solutions. Behind closed doors, there were frantic meetings about cutting costs and restructuring budgets. Advertisers, already spooked by the controversy surrounding The View, continued pulling out in droves. Without sponsorships, the show faced a grim future. For The View, the fallout was immediate. Ratings, which had surged during the height of the trial, began to plummet as viewers grew weary of the drama. Critics mocked the show for losing sight of its original purpose, to foster meaningful conversations. Instead, it had become synonymous with conflict and chaos. Behind the scenes, tensions among the hosts reached a breaking point. Arguments became frequent, and the once close-knit group started to fracture. Producers tried desperately to salvage the situation. They brought in new segments, revamped the format, and even introduced guest moderators to freshen things up. But nothing seemed to work. Audiences weren't buying it anymore. What had once been a beloved staple of daytime television now felt like a shadow of its former self. Amidst all this turmoil, Karoline stayed focused on moving forward. Winning the lawsuit gave her a platform unlike anything she'd experienced before. She used part of the settlement money to launch her own podcast, aptly named Unfiltered Truth. The show quickly gained traction, attracting listeners eager to hear her unvarnished take on politics, culture, and current events. Each episode drew thousands of downloads, and soon, advertisers came knocking at her door. Her rise didn't stop there. Book deals followed, along with invitations to speak at high-profile events across the country. Conservative media outlets embraced her as a rising star, praising her resilience and determination. Even some moderate voices began to acknowledge her ability to articulate complex ideas in ways that resonated with everyday people. Still, Karoline knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. While many celebrated her success, critics remained vocal. Some accused her of exploiting the lawsuit for personal gain, while others questioned whether she truly cared about the issues she spoke about or if she was simply chasing fame. But Karoline didn't let the negativity get to her. If anything, it fueled her drive to prove them wrong. Back at The View, the atmosphere grew darker by the day. Staff cuts became inevitable as the network struggled to stay afloat. Writers, producers, and crew members, many of whom had worked on the show for years, found themselves suddenly unemployed. Morale plummeted, and the quality of the program suffered. Viewers noticed, too. Social media lit up with complaints about awkward silences, repetitive topics, and scripted banter that lacked authenticity. Even longtime fans began tuning out. One viewer summed it up perfectly in an online comment. "It's like watching a ship sink slowly. You know it's going down, but you can't look away." Despite the challenges, Whoopi tried to keep the show afloat. She doubled down on her role as moderator, attempting to steer conversations back to constructive dialogue. But the damage was done. Trust between the co-hosts eroded, and the camaraderie that had defined The View for decades disappeared. As weeks turned into months, rumors swirled about the show's fate. Insiders whispered that ABC might replace it entirely with a new format, featuring less divisive personalities. Others speculated that Disney would cut its losses and shut the program down altogether. Whatever the outcome, it was clear that The View would never be the same again. For Karoline, though, this chapter marked a turning point. She had walked into the courtroom as someone fighting for respect and walked out as a symbol of perseverance. Her journey reminded people that standing up for oneself, even against overwhelming odds, could lead to unexpected opportunities. And while she may not have set out to dismantle a television institution, she couldn't deny feeling vindicated. As the dust settled, one thing was certain. The verdict wasn't just a win for Karoline. It was a wake-up call for an entire industry. The question now was whether Hollywood would learn from it or continue down the same rocky path. Only time would tell. The aftermath of the lawsuit verdict wasn't just felt in courtrooms or boardrooms. It seeped into every corner of The View. Behind the polished smiles and brightly lit set, chaos reigned. The once tight-knit group of co-hosts now resembled a fractured family with simmering tensions threatening to boil over at any moment. What happened backstage became as much a story as what aired on live television. It started subtly. At first, it was little things, snippy remarks during commercial breaks, icy glares exchanged when cameras weren't rolling. But soon, those small cracks widened into full-blown arguments. One particularly heated exchange between two of the hosts leaked online after a crew member accidentally left their mic on. Viewers were stunned to hear raised voices and accusations flying back and forth. "You're the reason we're in this mess," one host snapped. "If you hadn't pushed for that kind of content, maybe we wouldn't be losing sponsors left." "And right," another shot back. "Don't blame me because you can't handle tough conversations anymore. This show thrives on debate, or at least it used to." The leaked audio spread like wildfire, sparking debates among fans about who was really at fault. Some defended the hosts, saying they were under immense pressure. Others criticized them for airing their dirty laundry so publicly. Either way, it became clear that the dysfunction behind the scenes was no longer hidden. Things only got worse from there. Producers, desperate to keep the show running smoothly, tried to mediate the growing rifts. They organized private meetings, where everyone could voice their frustrations. But instead of healing wounds, these sessions often devolved into shouting matches. Longtime staff members described the atmosphere as toxic, with trust eroding faster than anyone could repair it. Even the younger cast members found themselves caught in the crossfire. One newer host, known for her more moderate stance, struggled to navigate the minefield of egos and emotions. She later admitted in an interview that she felt like she was walking on eggshells every time she stepped onto the set. "I came here to have meaningful conversations," she said, "but now it feels like I'm stuck in the middle of a war zone." As the internal battles raged, the quality of the show suffered. Segments that were once lively and engaging turned robotic and rehearsed. Writers complained that their creative freedom had been stripped away as executives demanded safer, less controversial topics. Gone were the days of spontaneous debates. Now, every word spoken on air was carefully scripted and vetted. Viewers noticed. Comments poured in criticizing the show for becoming bland and predictable. "Where's the spark?" one fan wrote online. "This isn't the same show I grew up watching." Another added, "It feels like they're just going through the motions now." The decline in ratings mirrored the drop in morale. Advertisers continued to flee, leaving gaping holes in the budget. To make matters worse, Disney mandated deep cuts to save money. Salaries were slashed, and key positions eliminated. Entire teams responsible for researching stories, booking guests, and writing scripts were let go. Without their expertise, the show struggled even more to maintain its edge. Backstage, the mood grew increasingly tense. Hosts arrived separately, avoiding eye contact as they made their way to hair and makeup. Conversations were kept to a minimum, limited to logistics rather than genuine interaction. Even the warm hugs and playful banter that used to define the show disappeared. In their place was an awkward silence that hung heavy in the air. Despite the turmoil, Whoopi remained a constant presence. Known for her resilience, she refused to give up on the show, even as cracks appeared in her usually unshakable demeanor. During one particularly rough rehearsal, she snapped at a producer over a minor scheduling issue. Later, she apologized profusely, explaining that the stress of everything was getting to her. It was a rare moment of vulnerability from someone who had always seemed invincible. Meanwhile, Karoline Leavitt watched from afar. Though she had moved on to focus on her podcast and speaking engagements, she couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication. Clips of the backstage drama surfaced online, painting a picture of a show spiraling out of control. Supporters praised her for exposing what they saw as hypocrisy within the entertainment industry. Critics, however, accused her of gloating, though she never publicly commented on the situation. For the remaining hosts, the daily grind became unbearable. Joy Behar, a veteran of the show, openly questioned whether continuing was worth it. "We've lost sight of why we started this," she reportedly told colleagues during a private meeting. "Is this still about giving women a voice? Or is it just about surviving another season?" Sunny Hostin, another longtime co-host, echoed similar sentiments. "I didn't sign up for this," she confided to a friend off camera. "This isn't fun anymore, it's exhausting." As weeks turned into months, rumors swirled about potential departures. Some speculated that multiple hosts might leave at the end of the season, while others predicted a complete overhaul of the cast. Executives floated ideas for revamping the format, including bringing in rotating guest moderators or shifting focus entirely to lighter, feel-good content. But none of these proposals seemed to address the root problem, the loss of authenticity that had defined The View for decades. Amidst all the uncertainty, one thing was clear: the show was fighting for its life. Once a trailblazer in daytime television, The View now faced an identity crisis. Could it recover from the damage inflicted by the lawsuit and internal strife? Or was this the beginning of the end? As the final episodes of the season approached, viewers tuned in not just for the content but to see how the hosts would handle the growing tension. Would they find a way to come together and remind audiences why they fell in love with the show in the first place? Or would the unraveling continue unchecked? No one knew for sure. But one thing was certain: whatever happened next would shape the legacy of The View, and perhaps the entire landscape of talk shows for years to come. While The View spiraled deeper into chaos, Karoline Leavitt was busy building a new chapter of her life, one that would redefine her career and cement her place in the public eye. Winning the lawsuit had given her more than just financial compensation. It gave her a platform, a voice, and an opportunity to prove her critics wrong, and she didn't waste a single moment. Karoline's first big move was launching her podcast, Unfiltered Truth. It wasn't flashy or overly produced. It was raw, real, and refreshingly honest. Each episode tackled topics ranging from politics and culture to personal growth and resilience. She spoke candidly about her own experiences, sharing lessons she'd learned along the way. Her authenticity resonated with listeners who were tired of polished sound bites and carefully curated opinions. Within weeks, the podcast climbed the charts, drawing thousands of downloads per episode. What set Unfiltered Truth apart was its conversational tone. Karoline didn't shy away from tough subjects, but she approached them with empathy and humor. She invited guests from all walks of life, writers, activists, entrepreneurs, even everyday people with extraordinary stories, to share their perspectives. Listeners appreciated how she made everyone feel heard, whether they agreed with her or not. "This isn't about preaching," she said in one episode, "it's about learning together." Her growing influence didn't stop at podcasting. Book deals quickly followed, with publishers eager to capitalize on her rising star status. Her first book, a mix of memoir and manifesto, became a bestseller almost overnight. In it, she wrote about overcoming adversity, staying true to oneself, and finding strength in vulnerability. Critics called it inspiring, while fans praised it as relatable and empowering. Karoline went on a nationwide tour to promote the book, packing auditoriums and connecting with audiences face-to-face. Media outlets took notice too. Conservative networks like Fox News began booking her regularly, recognizing her ability to articulate complex ideas in ways that appealed to a broad audience. But she didn't limit herself to partisan platforms. Mainstream talk shows, morning news programs, and even late-night comedy segments invited her to share her thoughts. Whether debating policy or cracking jokes, Karoline handled herself with grace and wit, earning respect from both allies and adversaries. Despite her success, not everyone was cheering her on. Some accused her of exploiting the lawsuit for personal gain, claiming she had orchestrated the entire ordeal to boost her profile. Others dismissed her as a political pawn, suggesting her rise was less about talent and more about timing. Karoline heard the criticism loud and clear, but instead of letting it discourage her, she used it as fuel. "If people want to call me opportunistic, fine," she said during a live interview. "But I know why I'm doing this. And if my work helps even one person feel empowered to speak up, then it's worth it." Her supporters rallied around her, defending her against attacks and celebrating her accomplishments. Social media played a huge role in amplifying her message. Clips of her interviews, snippets from her podcast, and quotes from her book went viral, reaching millions of people worldwide. Fans created fan pages dedicated to her, organizing watch parties for her appearances and hosting discussions inspired by her content. For many, she represented something bigger than herself, a symbol of standing firm in the face of adversity. Behind the scenes, Karoline remained grounded. Despite her newfound fame, she stayed connected to her roots. Friends and family often joined her on the road, keeping her company during long days of travel and appearances. She made time for quiet moments, reflecting on how far she'd come since the early days of her career, when she was dismissed as too young or too inexperienced. Those rejections no longer stung. They motivated her to keep pushing forward. As her star continued to rise, Karoline also focused on giving back. She launched a mentorship program aimed at helping young professionals navigate the challenges of breaking into competitive industries. Through workshops, webinars, and one-on-one coaching, she shared strategies for building confidence, networking effectively, and staying resilient in the face of setbacks. Participants described the program as transformative, crediting Karoline with helping them unlock their potential. Her efforts extended beyond mentoring too. She partnered with organizations focused on free speech advocacy, lending her voice to campaigns promoting open dialogue and accountability. At speaking engagements, she emphasized the importance of listening to opposing viewpoints, even when it felt uncomfortable. "We don't have to agree on everything," she often said, "but we do need to respect each other enough to have the conversation." Meanwhile, the contrast between Karoline's trajectory and The View's decline couldn't have been starker. While she thrived, the show struggled to stay relevant. Ratings continued to drop, and internal tensions showed no signs of easing. Viewers tuned out in droves, leaving ABC executives scrambling for solutions. Rumors swirled about potential replacements, for key hosts, format overhauls, and even outright cancellation. The once iconic roundtable now seemed like a relic of a bygone era. Karoline watched it all unfold from a distance, choosing not to gloat or rub salt in the wound. Instead, she framed the situation as a lesson in accountability. During a particularly poignant moment on her podcast, she addressed the controversy head-on. "I never wanted anyone to lose their job or see a show fail," she said. "But I did want people to understand the impact of their words, the weight they carry." This wasn't about revenge, it was about fairness. Her measured response earned her further admiration. Even some former critics softened their stance, acknowledging her maturity and perspective. It was clear that Karoline wasn't just riding a wave of momentum. She was shaping her legacy with intention and purpose. By the end of the year, there was no denying that Karoline Leavitt had emerged stronger than ever. What started as a heated exchange on national television had transformed into a journey of self-discovery, resilience, and triumph. She had taken a challenging moment in her life and turned it into an opportunity to inspire others, proving that sometimes the hardest battles lead to the greatest victories. And yet, as satisfying as her redemption arc was, Karoline knew her story wasn't finished. There were still mountains to climb, conversations to have, and lives to touch. With every step forward, she reminded herself, and everyone watching, that the power to shape your narrative lies within you. All it takes is courage, determination, and a willingness to embrace the unexpected twists along the way. The final season of The View was announced quietly, almost as if the network wanted it to slip under the radar. But nothing about this show, or its tumultuous journey, could ever stay quiet for long. When the news broke, it sent shockwaves through the entertainment world. Fans were divided. Some mourned the loss of a show that had been a staple of daytime television for nearly 3 decades. Others felt relief, believing the program had run its course and lost touch with what made it special in the first place. For the hosts, filming those last episodes was bittersweet. The roundtable, once buzzing with energy and camaraderie, now felt hollow. There were moments of genuine reflection, laughter, and even tears as they looked back on their time together. But beneath the surface, the cracks remained. Old wounds hadn't fully healed, and while everyone tried to put on a brave face, the tension lingered. In the farewell episode, the remaining co-hosts gathered around the iconic table one last time. Joy Behar, who had been with the show since its inception, opened the segment by acknowledging the weight of the moment. "This isn't easy," she admitted, her voice thick with emotion. "We've been through so much, ups and downs, triumphs and mistakes. But at the end of the day, we always tried to give women a voice. That's something I'm proud of." Whoopi Goldberg echoed similar sentiments but added a note of regret. "I made mistakes," she said softly, glancing down at her hands. "Big ones, and I own that. This show taught me a lot about myself, about resilience, and about how powerful words can be. For all the good we did, I hope people remember us for our intentions, not just our missteps." Other hosts chimed in, sharing memories of their favorite moments and thanking the audience for sticking with them through thick and thin. They spoke of the groundbreaking interviews, the heated debates, and the times they laughed so hard they cried. It was clear they loved the show, even if it hadn't always loved them back. But nostalgia couldn't mask the reality of what had happened. Ratings had plummeted, advertisers had fled, and trust among the team had eroded beyond repair. As the credits rolled for the final time, viewers tuned out knowing they were witnessing the end of an era. Social media flooded with tributes, critiques, and everything in between. Some fans expressed gratitude for the years of meaningful conversations. Others pointed out how far the show had strayed from its original mission. Karoline Leavitt watched, The finale from her home office, surrounded by reminders of her own journey. On one wall hung framed photos from her early days as a commentator, moments captured before anyone knew her name. On another shelf sat awards she'd received for her podcast and book. She smiled as she reflected on how much had changed since that fateful appearance on The View. Back then, she'd been dismissed as inexperienced, unqualified, and too young to matter. Now she was proof that perseverance could turn adversity into opportunity. As the screen faded to black, Karoline leaned back in her chair, letting the significance of the moment sink in. She didn't feel vindicated or victorious. Not exactly. Instead, she felt a deep sense of clarity. The lawsuit hadn't been about destroying The View. It had been about standing up for herself and demanding accountability. In doing so, she had sparked a conversation that extended far beyond the courtroom or the television screen. That night, Karoline recorded a new episode of Unfiltered Truth. Her tone was reflective but hopeful. "Today marks the end of The View," she began, "a show that shaped generations of viewers and gave women a platform to share their stories. Its legacy is complicated, full of highs and lows, triumphs and controversies. But isn't that true of all things worth remembering?" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "What I learned from this experience is that accountability isn't about tearing someone down. It's about holding space for growth. Words matter, actions matter, and when we mess up, and we will, we owe it to ourselves and others to acknowledge it, learn from it, and do better next time." Her message resonated deeply. Listeners flooded her social media accounts with messages of support, thanking her for framing the situation with grace and perspective. Even some former critics softened their stance, admitting they admired her ability to rise above bitterness and focus on the bigger picture. In the months that followed, rumors swirled about what might replace The View. ABC experimented with different formats, testing lighter talk shows and panel discussions aimed at younger audiences. None of them stuck. The void left by The View proved harder to fill than anyone anticipated. Critics speculated that the show's downfall wasn't just about bad decisions or internal drama. It was about a shift in cultural expectations. Audiences wanted authenticity, vulnerability, and real connection. Anything less felt hollow. Meanwhile, Karoline continued to thrive. Her podcast reached new heights, attracting high-profile guests and expanding into international markets. She launched a second book, this one focused on leadership and personal growth, which quickly became another bestseller. Speaking engagements poured in, taking her across the globe to share her story with diverse audiences. Through it all, she stayed grounded, crediting her success to the lessons she'd learned along the way. Looking back, Karoline realized how much she'd grown, not just professionally, but personally. Winning the lawsuit hadn't erased the pain of being dismissed or disrespected, but it had given her the tools to navigate life's challenges with strength and purpose. She often told her listeners, "You don't have to let other people define your worth. You get to decide who you are and where you're going." As the dust settled, one thing was undeniable. Both Karoline and The View had left indelible marks on the media landscape. For the show, it was a legacy of innovation and influence, but also cautionary tales about the cost of losing sight of your values. For Karoline, it was a testament to resilience, determination, and the power of standing firm in the face of adversity. And though their paths had diverged dramatically, they remained forever intertwined. The story of The View's decline and Karoline's rise served as a reminder that every action has consequences, and that change, whether painful or empowering, is inevitable. In the end, it wasn't just about who won or lost. It was about the ripple effects of choices made in front of millions of eyes, and the courage it takes to rewrite your story when the odds seem insurmountable.